Hi, everybody. We're here with our In Focus panel tonight on this election night, on this mayoral primary night, to talk about the latest races happening all across central Indiana. I'm here with Robin Winston and Mike Murphy from our In Focus panel. Robin Winston, the former Democratic State Party chair, and Mike Murphy, the former Republican state lawmaker. And we're also joined by Dr. Laura Wilson from the University of Indianapolis, political science professor there at UIndy, talking about a lot of these races tonight and also the turnout. We saw some pretty high turnout across central Indiana, across Marion County, but in the end, the results pretty much what we expected. We saw Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett ahead of Robin Shackelford on his way to victory tonight, 60-37. And on the Republican side of the aisle, Jefferson Shreve, the former councilman, with a 40-point advantage over Abdul Hakim Shabazz, headed to victory tonight in that primary. Mike, what do you make of these numbers and the matchup that we have now in the fall? Hogsett against Shreve for mayor.
Well, first of all, I would have to say I'm stunned that Robin Shackelford did as well as she did against a two-term incumbent mayor with millions of dollars. I mean, there are big problems in the Democratic Party. It'll be interesting to see if the Robin Shackelford voters, backers, stay with Hogsett for the fall election, or maybe they slide, or maybe they sit on their hands and don't vote at all, which is what happened during the Peterson defeat in 2007. Also have to give a shout out to Bobby Hidalgo Kern. He's run as a Republican. He's run for as a Democrat in every office you can run for. Still gets 1.5%. And then Larry Vaughn, famous for wearing the Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket on his head as he protests issue after issue. Those guys keep at it, and they got some votes.
Robin, what do you make of the numbers that we saw tonight and how this sets up for the fall? Do you think that the Shackelford voters tonight, and she did fairly well in that primary, though she ends up losing tonight, do you think they end up coming back to vote for the mayor in the fall?
Well, Mike is a master of messaging. The bottom line is that he would love for us to be fractious and not ready for the fall. But I believe that Representative Shackelford understands that this is a bigger game than just one night on an election night, and I believe that she will be there. Also, Dan, part of the reason that I'm very enthusiastic about this fall is that the turnout went up, and the turnout went up considerably among those casting Democratic votes. So if we can continue that kind of effort to have a good turnout in the fall of 23, then we will re-elect Joe Hogsett as mayor and continue to have the majority on the city county council.
Laura, what did you make of those turnout numbers? We saw 10,000 additional voters for early in-person voting, 10,000 plus additional voters for day of election day voting in Indianapolis. Those are some really significant increases when it comes to turnout.
They're incredible. And I think, first of all, we should say this is really impressive. And this is impressive for the candidates who won and those who didn't. Obviously, having competition on both sides of the aisle was great for voters because it gave them choice. It gave them difference in terms of policy and perspective. And people respond to that. When we look at these numbers, too, I think certainly in Marion County, having the open voting centers, having the ability, the access to early voting certainly plays a role. And we'll see that continue as people get more and more acclimated to it with each election cycle. But I think this is really big. And to Robin and Mike's points earlier, it's not just enough to come out to the primary. Right now, the presumptive winners have to be able to coalesce their party for the general election. And that will be a little challenging, I think, for both candidates from the major parties, because there was a lot of dissension. There was a lot of division, and you saw differences in the parties themselves with the different candidates. But turnout was huge. I think it's something really to be applauded for, and this was great for voters.
Yeah, really big turnout numbers. Let's talk about some of these suburban races as well that we've been following tonight. Westfield and Carmel will both elect new mayors. And while it was a close race there in Westfield, Scott Willis is victorious in the Westfield primary tonight. No Democrats on the ballot in the primary. So Willis now the likely mayor-elect in Westfield, unless Democrats are able to put up some competition against him in the fall. He just put out a statement moments ago saying, "I'm honored that the residents of Westfield have placed their trust in me to be their next mayor." He says he's worked hard to earn their support. He's victorious tonight there in Westfield. Meanwhile, in Carmel, an interesting primary there. It was a close one. Sue Finkham, a counselor there in Carmel, defeating another member of the council, Kevin Ryder, 36-32. There is a Democrat on the ballot who was unopposed in Carmel, Miles Nelson, who's well-funded and is hoping to put up a big fight in the fall here. What do you make of these numbers, Mike, in a race that really was very close there for the Republican nomination in Carmel?
And that's another stunning race. The two most stunning races, I think, are Carmel, where Sue Finkham, who was heavily outspent by Woody Ryder, was able to make a comeback financially, and her grassroots support was tremendous, and she wins. Ryder was backed by most of the establishment people,
including Jim Brainerd, the current mayor.
Yeah, and any consultant that makes any money off of office holders was backing Woody Ryder. She bucked the tide completely, financially and against the tide of the establishment. And then down in Johnson County, maybe the nastiest mayor's race in recent Indiana history. Those guys, it was like a tong war or something down there. I never heard anything about vision from any of them. It was all who is the biggest SOB of Greenwood. And I talked to a Bloomington voter, Nancy True, who was looking at races around the state, and she was just horrified at what was going on in Greenwood. And I think it's going to take a while for Greenwood office holders to get back together, and frankly, for the city to recover some of its image, because it was not good.
Greenwood Mayor Mark Myers victorious there, appears on his way to victory. But back to that Carmel race you mentioned, Mike, this is one that Democrats are hoping to perhaps pull an upset in the fall. Robin, as you look at these numbers tonight, Sue Finkham defeating Kevin Woody Ryder, how does that shape up when you look at a contest in the fall between her and Miles Nelson?
Miles Nelson is going to be an outstanding candidate in the fall. Elected to the city council, first Democrat, I believe, ever, and certainly in a long time. Carmel's been trending realistically, not just democratically, but realistically. And in the last few races, they have voted for Democrats who've offered realistic and pragmatic solutions to problems. And I believe that'll happen this time. They'll give the benefit of the doubt to Miles. I believe that party labels have been eschewed a lot in the community. Destiny Wells ran very well and won in Carmel this last time. Joe Donnelly has won in before. So when you ask for people that are going to look at a person realistically about how they can make a difference, I believe that Miles will be very, very competitive and could be the next mayor of Carmel.
We'll see what happens there. Also looking at the numbers here in Zionsville, where former local TV anchor John Stair was victorious tonight over Jane Burgess, a 10-point victory for Stair in that race. Current Mayor Emily Styron, a Democrat there in Zionsville, is not seeking re-election. So unless Democrats are able to put someone up against Stair in the fall on the ballot in November, he would become the next mayor of Zionsville. And Laura, just showing that not everyone in politics is lifelong in that pursuit. You do see people getting into politics late in life, and he's another example of that here.
Oh, you absolutely do. I think, Dan, this could be a future for you if it was something you wanted to do.
No, that's quite all right. No.
But we definitely see an increased trend of the idea of people not necessarily coming from public life or even the pipeline professions. We often think of law, education, business, and of course, politics being people's route into public office. I think it's exciting to see local community members stepping up and saying they want to contribute. They have an idea to help address some of the problems and challenges. They don't need to have a background in politics to be able to make that contribution. And that's what we see in some of these races.
Robin, Mike, what else stood out to you tonight as you look across the state of Indiana and some of the mayoral primaries? We saw the mayor of Fort Wayne win his primary convincingly, despite some of the controversies he's faced this past year. Other big city mayors doing well in their primaries too. What else stood out to you this evening? Mike, I'll start with you. Well,
I think you hit the nail on the head with Fort Wayne. And Mayor Henry, long-term incumbent mayor, generally liked by everybody. He had a slip up last year. He got a DUI while he was trying to take his ill wife home, And I think he handled it fairly well. Obviously, the voters thought he handled it fairly well because he won big today over the challenger. In Evansville, Cheryl Musgrave, a former state official in the Daniels administration, a former county assessor, a former county commissioner, she got whipped today. And I don't understand the dynamics there yet, but she was trying to follow a very popular mayor in Lloyd Winnicky, another TV star, by the way, Dan. And she never got off the mat. And I'm not quite sure what happened down there. That's a story that's probably yet to be told. And then in South Bend, Mayor Mueller, he just wiped up the competition there. And he does have a Republican opponent, but we haven't had a Republican mayor in South Bend since, I think, Lloyd Allen in 1971. So that's not going to change hands. But the great thing was, as you mentioned, Zionsville, common sense finally returns to Zionsville. They're going to have a Republican mayor no matter what. And name ID does pay off, as it did for John Stair.
Robin, what else stood out to you across the state tonight?
Well, first, Dan, here's a donkey, so you can be recruited to our party anytime you want. It's available for you.
I'm not
the real bottom line. The real bottom line
for
is
anything,
that
for anybody.
What's that? The real bottom
we
line
lost
is
you. I
that,
said I'm not running for anything.
I understand that, but you never know. TV hosts often become political people. But here's the bottom line: we had a really good day today. We had Joe Hogsett got reelected as mayor when his opponents not only were Robin Shackelford, but Jefferson Shreve, who spent probably $800,000 or $900,000 talking about Joe Hogsett's record. So we'll be ready for the fall. Tom Henry faced the camera straight up and addressed the issue that concerned a lot of people, yet voters reinstated him to be our nominee in the fall. Jim Mueller in South Bend, same way there. We have a good bench that's growing. We don't mention people like Tony Rosworski in Lafayette, who are unopposed, Charlie Wyatt, who did very well in Boonville. So we're going to be ready for the fall to elect Democratic mayors. There's 117 cities in our state. Right now, we have 54 Democratic mayors. We really hope to increase that number.
Laura, any final thoughts?
Well, we talked a lot about incumbency, but I would also add status quo was essential here, right? And incumbency advantage mattered for Indianapolis mayor, at least in terms of the primary. There was a major emphasis in terms of status quo candidates. And I think that's what you see in terms of the victories here in central Indiana, at least with Shreve and with Hogsett as well. That having the name recognition, having the funding, money matters, and that should be very clear after this. And there are exceptions. Certainly, we can talk about Sue Vinkham and Carmel, as Mike did earlier. But I think this gives us a couple key takeaways that really fall in line with what we know for the political science scholarship, but are also helpful indicators for what we should be looking forward to when we come into the general election in November.
All right. Our thanks to the panel for joining us tonight online. Laura Wilson, Robin Winston, Mike Murphy, we appreciate it, one and all. And we'll see some of you this Sunday as well on this week's edition of In Focus at 9:30 on Fox 59, 8:30 on CBS 4. Put that thing away, Robin. I'm not running for anything at all except for host of In Focus again this weekend. We'll see you all then. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night.